Literally 10 minutes ago, I spilled my water. It's a good start. Are you an individual that just started pyrography? Do you find that many times when you start it, you have a tendency of getting mistakes after mistake after mistake, and it's getting to a point where it's getting very frustrated? Well, in this video, I want to kind of go through a couple of mistakes that you can do during your pyrography creation and how to correct some of them, or give you some general tips on them, with my final one probably being my most important. So stick around for that in the end. Hello everyone, my name is Costa. I started pyrography over about a year ago. I'm super enjoying it. I have a very natural hand at it, which is actually very awesome. And then, to be honest with you, I've seen some people who have had some mistakes in pyrography that I think is good to kind of go over, because there's some common mistakes that some people will experience in pyrography during their sessions, during their creation, that absolutely will just take you from I love this to I hate this. So today we're going to go over a couple things such as jittery hands, uneven lines, smudges, burn lines, burn marks, design transfer hiccups, so on and so on and so on. But like I said, my final one is going to be probably my most important, so stick around for that. So what I've done is I've actually done this. I have a little board here, bad and good, it's nothing is bad or good. This is just how it is. It's happy accidents, as Bob Ross used to say. First and foremost, let's take the time to talk about probably one thing that I will say happens quite frequently, and is that it's uneven lines. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this could happen. There's one recommendation I heard a long time ago that I think was a fantastic recommendation for any piece that you're about to start. Always, 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 regardless if it's been sanded down already, sand your wood. Ooh, that sounds kinky. Sanding your wood, what it does, it actually takes away any grain that's potentially popping up on the wood. It helps specifically because sometimes grain can be a devastating issue with your actual piece. So taking that grain away, working on a flat surface, specifically when it comes to wood, is super, super helpful. I've also noticed that it helps actually burn faster and more cleaner. So my first recommendation, sand your wood. We're going to start with uneven lines or inconsistent strokes. Now, what I mean by that, and I have my wood burner on. By the way, if you guys want to know what wood burner I'm using, I will leave a link in the description below if you guys want to find out. Now, what I mean by uneven lines or inconsistent strokes is that sometimes somebody will start burning and immediately they'll be like, oh, okay, we're going to do this, The thing is with pyrography, you need to always have patience. Now, also, the biggest thing is a steady hand. You'll see here what I did. This one obviously is actually not that bad. This one, there's not much burn there, because what happens is after the first stroke, you dissipate a bit of the heat on the actual tip and will get lighter and lighter and lighter. So you got to be very slow with it. Then you'll see here that I start going, but stopping in areas because I want to kind of finish a line faster. Same concept here. This is kind of standpoints. So when you actually stand on a certain point, you will burn deeper and deeper and deeper. That is the general purpose of burning something. Obviously, you're not idiots, you know what I mean. How do you get around this? Now, first and foremost, there could be different things that cause this. One is the grain of the wood. If you have very grainy wood and you're going against the grain, what happens is that this will get bumpy on the grain and it'll push down on the wood a bit further once you go over that grain, which can cause the burn aspects here. There's not really much you can do to fix it other than kind of going back and just kind of going over them and just continuously trying to go over the pieces. But the biggest thing you always want to try to do is have a steady hand. So having a steady hand really goes a long way, not to mention also slowing that hand down. So keeping a steady hand will always give you a better line with that as well. Not to mention pulling the line towards you. A lot of people have a tendency of kind of going and doing this, and if you have very grainy wood, you'll notice that there's actually line inconsistent lines over here as well when you're going over the grain, or if you're going over a wood. Not to mention your grip will have a tendency of loosening the further away you get. So my recommendation also, specifically when you're working with anything, is just pull the actual burner towards you, because you will get a much better line that way as well. And you can see here the difference in both of these. Very similar kind of curve, regardless of that. If I were to go out, I would see kind of similar concepts there as well, because again, you're working with grain, you're working against the wood. Not to mention, usually when you lose that grip by going outwards, you have a tendency of losing control of the pen. So always, 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 my recommendation for anyone when they're working with this is go pull in with the line. Pull it towards you, regardless of the piece. Now, if you have something that's extremely large and you're working on a large piece, you can't do that because you can't flippity floppity flew these pieces all over the place. So those are situations where you got to be a little bit more extra careful and work kind of towards your benefits here, or the wood in general. But in this case here, when you have something small, flip it around, work towards you, flip it around, work towards you, flip it around, work it towards you. It's the easiest way that I could recommend anyone to work with. Go low and slow. That's usually the common actual recommendation for any wood burners out there. What I mean by that is lower the heat and work slow. Now, I'll turn this up to motherfucking levels. You're going to see this is going to start glowing red. This means that this motherfucker is goddamn hot. If I were to start now, you'll see that it's going to get very, very hot. And I can, again, if I really want to work fast, it can be detrimental to your product. Now, the other issue you have to take into consideration too is the wood you're working on. Is the wood soft? Is the wood hard? Is the wood easy to burn? Is the wood hard to burn on? I, for me, always prefer basswood. I've actually just recently started working with cherry wood, which is the big piece you see back there. Phenomenal piece of wood. I love cherry wood. I'm going to be using more of it. But you got to really take into consideration, okay, what wood am I burning on? Will it work well if I do very hot? Will it work well if I go very low but slow? So it just depends on it. Softer woods have a tendency of burning a lot easier and also a lot more consistently as well. But again, even when you're working very, very hot, you can have a tendency of one, screwing up the line, but also having a bit of bleed out. So let's talk about the bleed out. Bleed out, necessarily what it means is when you are burning something, you will see that the actual wood will have a bit of bleed when it comes to the line. When you're burning at a higher temperature, regardless of the situation, you may have a little bit of bleed out because that's just kind of the natural consistency of wood. You are taking a hot metallic piece of the thing and you're putting it on the wood and working on the wood. Now, this will have a tendency of burning because there's a lot of heat there. So the actual surrounding area will have a tendency of fluctuating in color. This is where a nice little knife like this comes in handy. Now, this is my trusty little knife that I usually use in a lot of my projects. The biggest thing I try to do with this, specifically when it comes to any bleed areas, is just take the knife and just... That's a horrible sound. Take the knife and just scrape away in that area. The reason why is because we're looking to remove that bleed. The other thing too is usually when you do this, you have a tendency of actually getting a bit more fine lines. Same concept here, try to pull it towards you, don't pull it away. And you'll see you'll get a bit more of a finer line when it comes with this. It helps kind of reduce the bleed that you'll get in your actual pieces, but there is a downside to this as well. And this is why I try to say, try to limit the amount that you use the knife. When you actually start scraping away on the wood, the way that you're getting rid of these bleeds or wrong lines or anything is you're actually taking a layer off that wood. So you got to be very cautious on that because after a period of time, you can see the layer being scraped off, specifically if you're working on it afterwards too. So you'll be working with a bit of an uneven surface. So try to be as less aggressive to this as possible. Don't just go in and be like, I'm done. What have I done? I think the best way I can always say this, try to show some love to the actual wood. That's usually the main cause and effect here. Please don't stab it like it owes you money. The other solution you could do, specifically with a heavy burn like this, is take sandpaper and sand it down. Now, I'm not really one to do that. I don't really like the effect that gives. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad effect, but usually when you sand that area down, specifically because the burn is so deep, one, you have a tendency of affecting the rest of the wood in that surrounding area. And two, when you burn or you get so deep, you'll see that it actually does clear up the lines pretty well and the bleed effects, but it's the same concept where you're getting deeper into the wood again. You're having that unevenness. And this in itself, I find with the line that it leaves behind, it's not as consistent as I would like it because there's also a tendency if you're doing and you sand too much, that line will start to begin to fade and fade and fade and you're gonna have to redo it, which then potentially gives the risk of, again, the bleed. So you gotta take that into consideration as well when it comes to sanding pieces of wood. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. Try it, see if it works well for you. Sometimes even doing that and blending to the background actually may help. You may actually have a nice little effect there. I always, again, will say happy accidents are always fantastic. One issue I've seen some people have is the shaky hand issue. Now, I had this originally when I first started. I had a tendency of starting and I could just kind of feel my hands shake when I was trying to burn something. It just didn't feel right. And then all of a sudden you have like kind of squiggly lines that look like they've had one too many drinks that night. This is a situational issue, because it depends on the individual who's doing it. So there are different ways you can kind of position your hand to do it. One is you can just be on your pinky like this, put your pinky down and kind of just try to keep your hand straight and kind of work from there. Another one is just go flat on the actual board like I do and just kind of work your hand from there. The biggest thing is you want to try to stabilize your hand as best as possible. I've seen individuals that put their right hand down and they're on here and they're just kind of resting their other hand on this. So there's just different ways of doing that, but know that it's very common. Also, when you're starting out, holding this pen for a long period of time, your hand will get tired. You will get shaky from the fact that your hand is just exhausted. One, take breaks. Don't actually go consistent throughout hours and just try to go. Take breaks, try to relax your hand a little bit, and every period of time your hand will get stronger and stronger and stronger, where that shakiness will obviously dissipate. But obviously it's situational. Some people have the shaking issue to begin with. So the best thing I could recommend in a situation like that is just try to find a way that you can support your hand to be able to give you a steady line. Now, I will also say, art is art. If you cannot stop your hand from shaking, and the design that you're making is not something up your alley, I always say work with it. I always find that even if you're shaky, find ways to kind of make certain lines or designs with a shaky hand. Like, imagine having a piece where it's just kind of this throughout the entire piece. It may not necessarily be what you want, but always think outside the box. Something that may not necessarily be artistic in your eyes can be absolutely beautiful to someone else. Even if you feel that this is something that's not going to be up your alley because of the situation you're in, try to create something to see if it will help. Try to see what you can make. Think outside the box. Be creative with it. So situations like this, very situational. There are ways to steady your hand from going over top to keeping your pinky down, or keeping your palm down, your pinky on here. There's obviously going to be times where you're working with a bigger piece of wood, your hand's going to be at a different level. Try to find ways to kind of elevate your hand too if you can. These are things that will come with time, and you'll find ways of holding not only the pen. Because I can give you suggestions right now, but again, it all depends on the actual pen that you have. Is the pen big enough? Is the pen long? Is the pen are you more fine tip so your hand's much closer to the tip, or are you further out from the tip? There's very, very different things that can cause and affect this. So it's always situational, and I always want to tell people that, regardless of this, even if you have shaky hands, this is still an art form that you can still get into. Even painting is a great art form to get into, because stuff like that doesn't necessarily mean that it limits you. It gives you more of a creative experience to create something that's different. Transferring design, I've done this a couple times, and there's situations and sometimes where when you transfer a certain design, the line that you want to draw just doesn't necessarily come out properly. So, giving a little example, I'm not going to put a design here, but I'm just going to give you an example of what will happen. Say I want to draw a line that goes down like this. Straight line, absolutely down. By the way, this is carbon paper. On one side is carbon, so it'll transfer over to the actual piece. But say this line, I didn't draw it straight, and all of a sudden I'm kind of going like this, and now the line looks like that. Well, that's just great. Situations like this can be very frustrating. The way that I always look at this and how I handle them, and it depends on anyone else who's doing this, when it comes to this, burn the actual line that you've drawn. So say I've already drawn the line that I want there. I'm going to burn this because this is exactly what I wanted to go over, which we just did. Not really my best burn, but whatever, it's a burn. And then from there, you can either take your sandpaper or your knife and just work that other line out. Just sand that other line out. Preferably, I like the knife a bit better. But again, always remember, you are taking a bit of the actual layer of the wood off. So take that into consideration. Once you do that, you'll notice that line is no longer there. Now, obviously it depends on the type of piece that you're making. Sometimes what people will do too is, if situations like this, is like, okay, well now I'm just going to do a quick shade over this to kind of, hide the fact that there's a little bit of a layer of the wood that's gone now. It depends on what piece that you are making, but stuff like this can definitely vary. Don't be too deterred when it comes to screwing up a line like that, because frankly, it happens to the best of us. It goes a long way. The knife or the sandpaper will work just as well as to correct those situations, or the smudges. Sometimes with working with carbon paper as well, if you have a tendency of putting your finger down too much here, and then you're like, oh wait, my finger was down there too much, and all of a sudden you do that, you're like, again, same situation here, sandpaper to go down. And the reason why we do it this way, and I'll tell you why, is because carbon paper doesn't erase like it normally would. So carbon paper is a bit more of it's fantastic for transferring designs over, but when it comes to actually erasing it, it's a pain in the ass. Now, there are different things. You can come in and you can draw what it is you want to draw on the piece and stuff like this. And usually when you work with pencil on wood, yes, you can erase that. So that actually works tremendously well, specifically if you've kind of screwed something up. But when you transfer a design that you really want to trace over, you're like, I want to trace this onto the wood, you got to use carbon paper. That's actually the best way, unless you want to freehand. Unless you're a god at freehanding, and if that's the case, then, well, you. But that is the best kind of recommendation I can tell you, is that if you have any problems with the carbon paper, the knife, or the sandpaper will go a long way with that. Or if you find that you've done a screw up in an area that's going to be covered anyways with a burn, it doesn't really matter then. Just leave it alone, because you're going to be burning over it, so no one will see it. One thing that I talked about earlier, and I'm going to talk about right now, temperature matters. Now, there are different type of wood burners out there that allow you to, one, control the temperature that you're utilizing, or two, you can turn it on and wait for it to heat up and then burn and put it back down to heat up again and then come back. And don't use those. They'll suck. Horrible. I have a Perceiva burner, and what this allows me to do is control the temperature from 250 degrees to 750 degrees. I find this works very well for me because, again, the situation here is that we have a steel tip that will heat up that we need to get burning. So it varies on the type of temperature that you have, and it's highly recommended to get a piece like this or a machine like this that controls the temperature variance. The reason also why is because every wood will always react differently. If you just really started working with pyrography and you really just got a wood and you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to burn this, there is differences in the types of wood that you use. I have worked with basswood, which is my main wood that I've worked with. I have worked with cherry wood. I've worked with acacia, pine before as well. There is another one that I've just recently did that's up there that we're actually working on a little stocking holder for the family. That piece in there is just a standalone piece that I just found and started working with. The grain is horrible on it. This piece that I just started working with right now, this right here is a piece of wood that I just had kind of laying around. I did the same thing. I sanded it to kind of get the grain down, but as you can tell too, when it comes to the actual way of burning, like the snowflakes, there's some areas that are just inconsistent because the wood was just not really good for burning purposes. So it is what it is for that. So some woods are going to be phenomenal for burning at certain temperatures. Some will be pretty bad at burning. So for me, basswood and cherry wood have been my two favorites. Acacia is not bad as well. I've done some compressed wood as well, where it's compressed into like a thin piece, and I've worked with that. I actually liked how that works out too. You don't really want to go with woods that have just been lying out in the world, because sometimes those are extremely difficult to work with, and you got to really flatten them down and really get them and all that grain out of the way. So again, it depends on you and how you want to progress with that. Another thing I will comment is to clean your tips. Now, maintenance on your wood burner is super important. One thing you will notice when you're burning on wood is you will have situations where carbon buildup is going to happen on your tip. My solution is I use my knife to kind of just scrape away at the carbon and just scrape away at the tip a little bit. Sometimes it really does a nice little horrible sound that makes my ears want to bleed. Other individuals, what they'll use is they'll actually take a steel brush and brush the tip as well. Some people will actually have like leather and baking soda to clean the tip and everything. I don't do that because frankly, I don't need to do that. So it all depends on how you want to upkeep your burner. Now for me, the knife is the best way for me. I've found it worked very, very well. So it depends on you, what you like to do, whether you like to lick it. Please don't lick it. That's one thing I recommend. Proper maintenance on the actual burner is very, very important, because you will notice that if there's a massive carbon buildup that's not coming off, you will notice horrible, horrible burning, inconsistent lines, inconsistent temperatures as well. So please, please, please make sure you maintain it as well during a live process of a wood burn. And my one final tip I will say, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Pyrography is very much a patience game. You will make mistakes, and when you do, don't be too upset about them. Don't throw your piece away because you feel it's the end of it. No, work around it. See what you can do with the mistake that you've done, or as some things that you've learned here, scrape it away, sand it down, shade over it, do what it is you want to try to do, but don't necessarily look at pyrography as a one-stop pony. If I do this, then this is it. If I make a mistake, then I'm done with this piece. I have made mistakes in the past. I have looked at pieces and thought, hey, these are not good. It's not going to go forward. I'll give you an example. Here is one piece that I worked with that I thought was going to be a good one. That is actually Sailor Moon cats. It was going to be kind of a yin-yang. Well, I didn't realize this, but this wood does not like getting scorched. So the issue I had here is that this is now starting to peel. This, unfortunately for me, is a no-go. I cannot use this. This is just not something that I like to use because you can see it's still peeling in specific areas. So what I've decided to do is this kind of a tester. So I'm going to use the back here to test different type of burners, different type of designs, and situations like this happen. Mistakes happen. Don't be too upset about it. Look at it as kind of a learning curve. I now know not to scorch these because, well, I've learned that wood does not like getting scorched, which is perfectly fine. But the thing is, it's a learning curve throughout the process. So don't be too upset when mistakes happen. Have patience with this art form because it takes massive, massive patience to actually get from point A to point B. And it's a slow process because that's just kind of what it is. You're burning into wood. You want to be careful with this. This is not a quick thing. Don't think I'm going to get through these quick and pump these out like there's no tomorrow. You want to understand that situations like that will cause problems and cause errors. You want to take things slowly and just see how it develops. Little by little will go a long way. And I guarantee you will do absolutely amazing when you do that. Let me know in the comments if you found any of these tips helpful. What tips do you have for anyone who's starting on pyrography? I'm going to be doing more videos as well. If you guys want to see anything specific to pyrography, let me know what you would like to see in the comments below. Do me a favor, also check out heelscreations.com. Having a fantastic holiday deal right now. Everything on there is 10% off. Please check it out and let me know what you guys think of the pieces. I'm going to try to come at you with about an upload a week if I possibly can because just my time's all over the place. Thank you, IRL. But let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this. Do me a favor, hit that like, hit that sub button if you watched all the way. I truly appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. And remember, keep burning.